What's the plan?
Hey guys, Shadow88 here with a look at BattleTech, the latest game from Harebrained Schemes. This is a turn-based tactics game set in the BattleTech universe. If you don't recognize the name BattleTech, it is the franchise that the MechWarrior games are a spin-off of. It's all the same universe, just different mediums. The MechWarrior title is usually used for the BattleMech pilot simulators. This is closer to the original tabletop game, where you control a number of BattleMechs, and the tabletop version is more like a hex-based version of a tabletop war game, like Warhammer 40,000 or the like. This is very close to it. The rules are somewhat different, but it's got a lot of similar elements to it. It feels very much like the tabletop game, and that is something I absolutely love. The tabletop game is a little complex. I'll talk more about that in the addendum blog post, but for a turn-based strategy game, it is brilliant. About the only flaw I really have with it, with the possible exception of the very long load times and an issue with inspiration, which I'll get to when it comes up in the video, the actual tactics are a little finicky to get my head around. It's one of those games where positioning is incredibly important. And basically, I am not very good at predicting positioning, as you'll see in the video. At a couple of points, I'll leave a mech out of position, and it'll get focus fired and torn to crap. But there's a lot of flexibility in what tactics you can use. The addendum blog post will also go over some of the mechanics, like how the initiative system works, which, just to give you a shorthand so you understand, each turn is split into 5 initiative phases. Who acts in those phases is based on the weight class of the battle mech, and whether the pilot has a skill that lets them act one phase earlier. So your light mechs normally act in phase 4, your mediums in phase 3, your heavies in 2, and your assaults in phase 1. Now, a mech can reserve into a lower initiative phase if necessary, or you want to, and it won't lose any defensive bonuses it got from its previous turn. Those will remain until the battle mech decides to activate again. So, just because a battle mech is going to be sitting there for most of the turn does not mean it is sitting there doing nothing, being easier to shoot. It is biding its time and waiting to strike. Now, the initiative phase, it does take a bit to get your head around. But the potential is there if you learn to get the hang of it. And I'll have at least 1 or 2 examples of how you can use it well in the addendum blog post. If not in the blog post, then I might actually do a follow-up video demonstrating. No guarantees on that. The beta at this stage, which is what you're seeing here, this is not the full game, it's not finished yet. This is just the beta version. It's only against the AI, so, there's no guarantee I'll be able to set up the demonstration scenarios that I want to be able to explain how you can make the most of this initiative system. But at the very least, I'll explain how it'll work. I'll explain more detail on the mechanics in the video addendum blog post. But the short version is, this feels like BattleTech. This feels like what you would want from a BattleTech game. All of the core elements of the tabletop game are there. It is important how your battle mechs are positioned, what direction you're shooting your enemy from, which sides you have facing the enemy, how you get your mechs to work together, making use of terrain, all of that, including heat management, and the chance for a battle mech to end up falling over, it's all there. Melee is in this. We finally have battle mech melee in a video game. We have not had that in at least Crimson Hawk's Revenge, which was back in the era of the Super Nintendo? I never actually played it. It was well before my time. I can't actually remember what I've read about it now, but that would have been the earliest that any BattleTech game would have had melee combat, and we have not had it since. It feels appropriate for this game. I mean, okay, the animations, they're not your big, fancy Dawn of War-esque sync kill all really awesome animations. They're very simple, but they get the job done, and they're sort of what you'd expect from harebrained schemes. I mean, let's be honest, this is still something of a budget title. This is not your big, massive AAA monstrosity like Dawn of War.
Rolling.
So, and there's a lot of elements to the UI that are really helpful. Like, you'll see at various points when I'm previewing a move for my mechs, it'll show lines depicting line of sight. And what color those lines are, whether they are arced or straight, and if they intersect terrain or not, is all clearly indicated, because all of that can affect what the mech will be able to shoot at the end of that movement. So you can see here, the line is arced over terrain. That means I do not have direct line of sight, but thanks to sensor lock from Witness's commando... Was it Witness or Mockingbird? I can't actually read the names on the... No, it was Was it Mockingbird? Sorry, I cannot read the pilot names here at all in this preview window. But her sensor lock has now revealed the Shadowhawk, and that's what's letting me fire at it. So my trebuchet there didn't have direct line of sight, but it had the sensor lock from the commando and could fire over the hill. Fire its LRMs over the hill, because they are indirect fire weapons. If it's a straight line, that means clear shot, perfectly fine. If it's a white dotted line, that means the enemy will have line of sight to them, but you won't have enough movement left to turn around and face them yourself. So that'll be that's basically saying, yes, you can shoot at them, but they'll be able to shoot at you as well. And you'll probably catch glimpses of that when I'm setting the facing before giving the move order. Like when a line of sight indicator is outside of that firing arc, you'll see it turn white. If it intersects terrain, there'll be a little, like, crossed out eye icon at some point on the line, and everything after that point is grey. That means the target's obstructed, so it gets a so I get a penalty on the attack roll. And there's just again, it feels like BattleTech, and even the indicator for the firing arcs can be customized. You can see the weapons panel down in the bottom right there. The firing arc indicator will only display the optimal ranges for the weapons you have selected. So if you want to be certain that a target's only within range of, say, a PPC, you just turn off all the other weapons on the list, and then when you're previewing the facing, which you can back out from if it's not clear, you're not committed to a movement as soon as you click down. You can back out at any time. So you can do that, and the firing arc indicator will only show the optimum range for that particle projection cannon, not any of your other weapons. So it's a good way to see exactly where you need to move to get such and such a target into line of sight. Not into line of sight, into range. And you'll also see, when I'm doing that, you'll also see pips, like orange brackets around each battle mech. Each enemy battle mech that the mech I'm using has line of sight to. Those are, again, another indicator of optimal range. I'm still trying to wrap my head around how it reads them, like whether it just goes like the top, like the innermost set of brackets is the first weapon in the list and goes down from there. I'm not certain yet. You'll probably figure out just from watching this video, actually, now that I've said that, but that's an easy way to see when a target's going to be in optimal range of your weapons before you give the move order. And that is the sort of thing you really need in a game like this. When range is a deciding factor, you want to be able to know for absolute certainty that you will be able to fire the weapon with a reasonable amount of accuracy. Particularly when you're talking about weapons that have minimum ranges, like particle projection cannons, like long-range missiles, like autocannons 2s and 5s. Those all have minimum ranges. And there's just, I like that quality of life additions. They're the sort of thing you really need, and I am disappointed when a game does not have that, so I'm very glad that BattleTech does. About the only such thing I want this game to have, that it does not currently, is a clear numerical indication of how far a battle mech can move in its activation. How far can it run? How far can it sprint? how far can it jump? There's no indicators for that beyond the grid you get when you select the battle mech, and again, that only appears when it's the battle mech's turn to move, so it makes it tricky to plan out future turns. So, I really hope that they add at least a clear numerical indicator of how far a mech can move. I want that in the game. I don't know if we'll ever get it, but it's something I want in. Now, graphics-wise, I know I don't zoom in too much here. That being said, you will get some close-ups, not just from when mechs are getting shot, but also in melee combat. The camera will automatically zoom right in and up close. You'll see all sorts of details. Now, I'm running this at the highest graphics settings available. Now, the options menu is not actually working in the game at this stage. So you just have like your low, medium, and high defaults for the Unity engine. Yes, this is running on Unity, but it's Unity 5. All the horror stories and whatnot you've heard, they're for Unity 4. So don't blame the engine for certain failings on here, because it's a different version of it. Now, again, there are one other indicator that I would like to see that's not currently in the game, is an indicator of how many pilot hits an enemy mech has taken. So, like you saw when Sumo's Vindicator got shot just before, it said, like, head hit, pilot injured, and you can see down on his portrait there that the little icon in the bottom right of it is now orange, as opposed to everyone else's where it's white. That's his pilot health, because in BattleTech, your pilot can be injured as well as the mech. In this game in particular, that your pilot is injured anytime the head takes a hit, which, as you may have noticed from the paper doll indicator for Sumo's mech, that the head took quite a pounding. And if the battle mech falls over. Now, falling over, if you haven't worked it out, is that orange, which you probably haven't because nobody's fallen over yet, is that orange bar under the heat indicator on their... the orange bar is your stability. When that becomes full, that will be... the battle mech will fall over, and it will take... I don't think it takes any damage, but the pilot will be injured. A pilot can only take 6 injuries before dying in the cockpit. That's even if everything else on the mech is still functional. Even if you never got through the armor on the head, if you never took off a limb, if the battle mech is otherwise perfectly intact, but the pilot is dead because the thing kept getting knocked over, well, obviously it's not going to be... obviously, in campaign, that's going to be quite useful because you'll be able to salvage the mech and your repair bill will be pretty minimal on it. Now, you'll notice that on some of the mechs here, the stability bar is half full, but not going below that. That's because they've reached a stage called unsteady. Unsteady can only be removed by bracing, which is an action they take where they basically brace themselves for impact, they'll take less damage, but they won't be able to shoot that turn. Doing so also clears them entirely of the unsteady trait and resets their stability bar to 0. Each activation, at the end of your activation, your stability bar drops down either to halfway or to empty, depending on where it is. If you're already above that unsteady mark, it'll only drop down to halfway. So, and on top of that, it is actually impossible, no matter how many missiles or whatever you use, to knock an enemy battle mech down with one hit. It always has to be a team effort. You've got to use one person to do most of the stability damage, and then another person to finish them off.
On my way.
Now the AI, if you haven't already figured it out from what's happening to this hunchback, it's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. And this hunchback has let itself get into a very bad position where Sumo and Buckshot have been able to give it a rather vigorous round of surprise butt sex. And finished it off. So now there's the other two mediums coming up the field. And I admit, I am not an expert at this game. If you want to see how to play this really well, I suggest checking out No Guts No Galaxy TV on Twitch and on YouTube. Sean hasn't done a lot of BattleTech gameplay yet. I think it's just 2 streams, but some of them, particularly the second one, which is up on YouTube at the moment, it is a very good example of how to play this game properly, but also shows that misclicks are still a thing. Now, okay, what'll be coming up at some point soon, I don't know can't remember exactly when, I recorded this yesterday, compared to when I'm recording the audio. See how the blue bar beside my pilot portraits has filled up to blue, and there's now an Inspire button over the portraits. Inspiration is a thing you build up by damaging the enemy, by killing the enemy, and basically anything you want to do right. It boosts morale, and when that's full, you can use Inspire, and what that does is, for that activation, the person who has been inspired will automatically have a 95% hit chance on any weapons they fire that turn, but it will do nothing to penalties from minimum range. So, you can't have a catapult walk up and blast a whole bunch of LRMs into someone's face. That's still not going to work. But it'll also ignore any defensive bonuses. For instance, guarded, cover, evasive. At various points, you'll see me mouse over the icons for those. And so feel free to pause the video at those points and read what they do. They're pretty straightforward. For instance, evasive, it just makes the target harder to hit. Normally, you only get that by the BattleTech sprinting, which means that it doesn't get to shoot that turn. Paradise in his Griffin is an exception to that, because his pilot skill means that he gains evasive just on a single ordinary move action. So he can move, shoot, and still gain evasive. And what evasive does is it means that any attack that does hit him, he then gets to make a 50-50 chance. He has to make a dodge roll with a 50-50 chance, and if he passes, that attack misses. He makes a dodge roll for each impact on his mech. So every shot from a laser, or every burst from an autocannon, every individual missile in an LRM salvo, he'd make that dodge roll on all of them. And you probably saw before, when he got hit with some LRMs, that a lot of the times the word dodge appeared over his battle mech. That's because he was making his dodge roll against a lot of those missiles. So he took only a portion of the damage he would otherwise have taken. So, one other thing with Inspiration, and I should point out that this is getting a lot of debate on the forums whether it's balanced or not. So before you go complaining about it, do know that it is being actively discussed by the other beta testers. It's not, you don't have to worry about that. So it is being debated whether it is too powerful, whether it's not powerful enough, whatever. But one extra mechanic about it that's easy to miss is that every time either side uses Inspiration, from that point on, the bar will refill faster. Yeah. So your first Inspiration, it'll take a bit to get. You probably won't, like in this case, you probably won't get it till you take out at least one enemy mech. But then the next time it might happen after you've only taken a couple of limbs off. Then after that, you might only just need a few hits, and so on, and so on, and so on. And so, yeah, there's an example of me mousing over a ability. Precision. Now, this is cold shots. I should have mentioned this. When a battle mech is shut down from overheating, or knocked over in this case, you get to make a cold shot, which is when you specifically pick a section of the battle mech to hit.
That's a critical hit.
In this case, I was going for the center torso, and Sumo didn't mucked it up. He didn't hit. Now, at this stage, the best thing to do is to finish off that Shadowhawk. I want to get it off the field. It is one less battle mech to worry about. So,
as you wish.
Yeah, and now here's Inspiration. So, this is probably overkill, to be honest. I'm really just using it for the... Oh, no, wait, that's right. I was shooting him at... I was having him fire at the Griffin. My mistake. Again, this preview window, it is very hard to really tell exactly what's going on, and I recorded the gameplay yesterday, so... Okay, now that salvo of missiles... That is an example of me leaving a battle mech out of position. Though, to be fair, I don't think I could have done anything about that. Because the enemy has line of sight to my commando thanks to these two enemy battle mechs here. So just so as long as they can see my commando, the catapult they've got firing from over there can still shoot at them. Now, you probably also noticed it with the... it's another quality of life thing. When I was attacking the Hunchback, for instance, you might have noticed that the circle under him was having one section of it highlighted as I was choosing a movement location. Those represent what arcs the battle mech will be hit in, so front, left, right, or rear. And on the little paper doll preview of the enemy mech at the top, when I'm choosing what weapons to fire, it'll actually have a red highlight over around what areas are likely to be hit. So, just here where I'm moving Sumo behind the Griffin, okay, you can't probably really see it because the Griffin's in the way. Okay, but now if he fires from here, it's hitting the side arc, and you can see in the preview there's that red coloring around the arc, around the side of the battle mech. Now eventually I changed my mind and I just decided to punch the guy. But again, arc is an issue here. Now it doesn't really make much difference on the Griffin because it's taken so little damage, but... there we go. Ah, yes, now that reminds me of another thing they've done. Now, a lot of BattleTech titles, small lasers, machine guns, and flamers, they tend to get a bad rap for various reasons. Like in MechWarrior Online, for instance, they're generally not seen as all that useful. About the only time I've seen them used successfully has been spamming small lasers, like a Jenner loaded with like 6 of them or something. But that's what they do in BattleTech here, is they're actually included, they can be fired as part of a melee attack. So it's a little bit of extra damage. Each one has different effects. For instance, machine guns will actually, if they fire into a section that's lost its armor, has a much higher chance of critting the various components inside. So you could damage or destroy weapons, knock out heat sinks, all that sort of good stuff. And one thing to point out with heat is when it gets above, you'll see 1 pip on the heat gauge. That first pip is when they will start taking damage. So they go over that, they start taking internal structure damage. In addition, that while they're over that, they actually suffer penalties to movement and shooting, simply because, well, in the fiction at least, the heat is causing the artificial muscles of the mech to start seizing up. So you generally want to avoid overheating unless it's you have a good reason for it, which I admit I probably could have taken some tactical overheats here and there, but the hindsight and all that. Now when you fill the bar entirely, that's when your battle mech will shut down for at least 1 turn, possibly more. I have rarely shut down, so I can't remember. Strictly speaking, you want to avoid overheating when possible, but there are some tactical uses for it. For instance, I could have just unload, since that enemy Griffin is the only one giving line of sight to my team, I could have just had everybody unload everything they had into it, possibly overheated 1 or 2 people, and then the catapult would have had to come all the way around that ridge in the center of the map there and attack us directly.
What's the plan?
So, could've, shoulda, woulda, didn't.
Have no doubt it will be
Yeah,
done.
the maps are actually a lot larger than you think. Like, you're not actually starting at the very edges of the map. Like, you can see that whole forest there is behind where my guy's deployed. That whole mountain there to the just below Paradise's Griffin there, that's all usable. There's probably even more further back, I don't recall off the top of my head, but you start maybe about probably a quarter or a third of the way in from the edge, so they're not using the entirety of the map, but I think that's because if you start even further out, it'll take even longer for you to find each other. Also, one thing to point out, my one other gripe with the game is Paradise's voice acting. The guy sounds insane. I don't know... Oh, maybe not insane. I don't know how to really put it, but something about his voice acting just annoys me.
Yes, Commander.
Yeah, it's really hard to describe. I'm sure some of you might agree with me, some of you might think otherwise. That's just my opinion. Take it for what you will. Now, sensor lock there was... I'm still not entirely sure if it negates cover or not, but as you can see, totally there was no real need to because he came out of the forest. Okay, now Mockingbird losing that arm means she now has no more weapons on her commando. In a lot of games, you might think, oh well, now she's useless. Light mechs are never useless in this game, and I am incredibly thankful for that, because all too often you see the light mechs getting shoved to the side and becoming useless, and I'm glad that they still get a fair bit of use, because she can still be running around, she can still be sensor locking people, she can give line of sight for a lance that actually has a lot of LRMs in it, if you haven't already noticed. So, you know, she's a good spotter, even though she's lost all of her weaponry. That being said, considering the state her commando's in, I probably don't want to let her get too close to the enemy, because, you know, commandos don't have that much armor at the best of times, and I don't think she's got all that much left.
Yeah.
So, now, one thing that surprised me with this was that standing up costs you nothing. You still have all of your full movement, and you can still run, you can still sprint, you can still do all of that, you can still use your jump jets, you can do all that after standing up, which surprised me, because a lot of games, the penalty for standing up is you lose some of your movement, or or an entire action, or, you know, things like that. In this, all you really take is a penalty on your to-hit rolls. So, I know I didn't hover over it there, because I realized in an earlier battle, but you take actually a not insignificant penalty to your attack rolls on the turn you stand up, so that is something to consider. Okay, now see all the four words that popped up over the catapult there? That means it braced. So it used the brace action because it expected to take a crap load of fire, and it's not wrong.
Alright, I'm up
No,
again.
so once I get... Now the good thing is, since it's the only mech left, Mockingbird is perfectly safe. I just need to keep that ridge between them. And keep sensor locking it. And it's a catapult, so as long as I get close, its LRMs are useless. That being said, I've still got some LRMs of my own, so I figure, hey, why not? So, again, this is what I was expecting from a BattleTech game. I am enjoying it. There's a lot of tactical potential there. I am absolutely terrible at it, which, again, is exactly what I expected. And, yeah, there you go. Heat affecting my performance. That they have a reminder of it there. And so it's just, it feels nice. I haven't had any technical issues with this. It hasn't crashed on me. There's been no frame rate drops. There's been none of that. It's all worked perfectly smoothly. Now, whether that's still going to be the case in the finished product, obviously, I don't know. There's no official release date yet. It is still in development.
You have orders?
There's no exact word on when it is coming out. What they have said, though, is that there'll be a brief period, probably about a week or two, I think they said, probably longer, where the beta will be taken offline before launch. So there isn't going to be that gap there between the end of the beta and the start of the launch, but it should be, you know, you should be able to put up with it. And they are going to be patching multiplayer into the beta at some point. Exactly when, I don't know. I'll try and get a video up of a multiplayer match when it is up. Exactly who I'd play this against, I don't know, because I don't know who on my friends list actually owns it as well, so... Something to look forward to.
Something I can
Anyway,
do.
one other thing to point out with the game. If you want to get access to the beta yourself, you can by going onto BackerKit and purchasing the $60 package. That includes the game, a novella by Michael A. Stackpole. It's also got a bunch of wallpapers, an art book, and a pre-order of the game itself, and the $60 package is the one that includes access to the beta. You do that, you'll get it maybe... I've seen some people say they got it within 20 minutes. It might be longer, it might be shorter, depends how much of a backlog there is, and exactly when you get it, obviously. So, you know, if you want beta access and you think it's worth the money, go for it. If you don't think it's worth $60, just wait, see how it goes, buy it on launch. I'm almost certain it'll be cheaper on launch as well. The $60 package, again, it's got all those extras in it. How much cheaper than $60 it'll be, I don't know. I'm just guessing here off the top of my head. You know, I'm not saying for certain. Now, in case you haven't heard, this will have a full campaign. It'll be focused on a number of periphery states set in 3025. So it'll be mostly... if you're familiar with BattleTech lore, this is to the south of the Inner Sphere. Or whatever the actual term is, I can't remember. But below House Liao, below House Davion, it'll be mostly in the Taurian Concordat, the Magistracy of Canopus, or however the hell that's pronounced, I don't know. And a whole new periphery state that Harebrained Schemes has developed, called the Oregon Coalition, which is their it's bordering the Taurian Concordat directly below the Capellan Confederation. I'll have a map in either the video description or in the addendum blog post, if you're curious. And the campaign will be sort of akin to what was in MechWarrior 4 Mercenaries in some respects. There will be a story to it, but there'll be a lot of side missions you can take, a lot of side jobs just to make money, to earn salvage. And that bit, it doesn't actually end. There's no... It'll be like in, for lack of a better description, an Elder Scrolls game, where you can keep playing even after that you've finished the storyline. So you'll still be able to get all these other missions and so on after you've completed the campaign, and just keep playing as long as you like. There, at E3 earlier this weekend, they previewed some of the campaign stuff, mostly shots inside your dropship headquarters, a ship called the Argo, just showing different sections of the Argo, so like the crew quarters, captain's cabin, the mech bay, all that stuff. I'll have a link to that in the video description as well. And it is looking pretty good. And I do like the style they've gone with for the mech lab. It feels very nice, and it's creative. I like it. It's clever for... It's not what you'd normally expect from a... It's not what you've seen in a lot of BattleTech games. Like, a lot of them, you switch from one mech to another, it just instantly flicks over. This one, you'll see what I mean when it comes up.
Of course.
And... there's just all these little details to it that I like the look of, that I'm eager to actually get my hands on in full. But, again, there's no release date announced. I have no idea when this will be ready, but it is... the wait is killing me. I want to get into this. And it's in an era of the BattleTech setting that I know very little about, but that I'm very curious on. I've always liked the concept behind the late Succession Wars era when this is set. When you were having to rely on battle mechs that were hundreds of years old, that you were keeping running just from what you could salvage and scrape together, what you could grab from scrapyards, or what you could pull off dead mechs, where what mechs you had were based entirely on what you could get your hands on, because so much technology was lost. And there are a lot of stuff that you actually see. Funny enough, you actually see a lot of balance questions about some of the tech that just wasn't around in the Succession Wars era. Things like endosteel internal structure, things like double heat sinks, XL engines, Gauss rifles, ECM. A lot of that stuff just wasn't around back then. It feels very low tech, very used, and it's an era. It's a design I quite like. I want to see more of this. So I'm glad that that era is actually seeing something of a resurgence in the BattleTech franchise lately, thanks to mainly this game and the upcoming MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries, which is actually starting in, which, from what I've read, the campaign for that starts in 3015 and runs all the way through to 3049. So you'll actually see that tech advance and come up. So there's so much to look forward to in BattleTech in general. Or at least in the BattleTech video games in general. I haven't looked at the tabletop game in a while. But just as far as BattleTech video games go, there's so much to look forward to that I really want to see it come up, and I am just glad that that BattleTech at least is in very good hands. MechWarrior 5, I'm cautiously optimistic about, and why that is, I will explain in the addendum blog post, and I suggest you keep such discussion on the game to there, rather than clog up the comments here about it. But I really want to play the full version of this. I want to just get into it. I just wish that, I just really hope that before the beta finishes, they finally unlock all the mechs that they don't have in yet.
What's the plan?
But that will be in the finished product. So the Marauder, the Warhammer, just all these other battle mechs that I like the look of. But anyway, that's the mission over and done with. I'm sorry if I rambled on a bit, but again, I really want to play the full version of this. I want to get into the campaign. But anyway, I think that's enough fanboying from me, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you around.